UFOs. If we do finally make contact with aliens, how will it happen? Will they arrive in fantastic spacecraft like the UFOs glimpsed recently above Mexico City? Will we pick up a faint signal from their corner of the universe? Or will we arrive too late and find the ruins of an ancient alien civilization? Making contact with aliens and UFOs next. Even from a distance of 93 million miles, the sun is the source of all our bounty. Without its warming rays, the Earth would be a lifeless hunk of rock, orbiting silently in the vacuum of space. The ancients were well aware of the sun's importance. When the sky suddenly darkened during a solar eclipse, they thought it might be the end of the world.
Eclipses are a fine example of how the ancient person responded to an unexpected astronomical phenomenon, because eclipses were not predictable to the ancients. They didn't know what it was. They didn't know that it was the moon passing in front of the sun. They thought the sun was being devoured by some evil god. So throughout the world, people were frightened by this.
Gradually, science replaced superstition. In 1540, the Polish astronomer Nicholas Copernicus published his revolutionary theory that the sun, not the Earth, was the center of the solar system. In the early 1600s, Galileo improved the new scientific marvel, the telescope, enough to prove the Copernican theory was fact. In modern times, the rhythms of sun, moon, and Earth are well understood, so that a solar eclipse is the occasion for excitement rather than fear. And so it was that on July 11th, 1991, families around Mexico City gathered on street corners to witness one of the longest solar eclipses of the century. They brought telescopes and video cameras, but when they looked skyward, a surprise awaited.
The people were recording the eclipse when they saw UFOs in the sky, and they were able to record, at least in 3 different cities, exactly at the same time, the same kind of UFOs.
By 1:25 p.m., the sky had darkened, temperatures dropped, and something extraordinary still appeared in the skies above Mexico City. Jaime Maussan, producer of Mexico's equivalent of 60 Minutes, played some of the UFO videos on his program. They were taken at the same time from 3 different cities. The tapes ignited an immediate controversy. Critics charged that the purported UFO was nothing more than the planet Venus, which became visible during the total eclipse. In late July 1991, Maussan made an on-air request for more UFO videos. His viewers formed groups known as Los Vigilantes del Cielo, the Sky Watchers.
There are many dozens of these vigilantes all around the country, and that way we can survey the sky of Mexico very effectively. We have at least from 8 to 10,000 videos in Mexico. It's the largest collection ever. Probably not all of them are UFOs. Probably some of them are balloons, some others are airplanes, but many of them, probably 10 to 15% of them, are really good, mysterious objects, something that cannot be explained easily.
The object in this video moves in reverse, stops, and hovers, patterns of flight not associated with airplanes, birds, or weather balloons. On September 16, 1993, Mexico's Independence Day, a shimmering silver object seems to fly near a squadron of military helicopters that appeared in formation over the capital. Several UFOs have been reported near Popocatépetl, an active volcano that looms some 50 miles from Mexico City. The government keeps this camera permanently trained on the volcano, watching for eruptions. In June of 1999, it snapped this picture of a UFO. Some of the Mexico videos show large clusters of objects hovering in the sky. These formations resemble those filmed in the United States during July of 1952. However, no scientific comparison has yet been made.
We have basically a mass of seemingly good evidence that has yet to be sifted through by UFO investigators. It's too soon to tell whether or not videos were taken of actual UFOs, whatever they are, or whether some of these things are just hoaxes or, things showing planets or airplanes flying by. We need more research into these particular sightings.
Some of the Mexican videos seem to be unexplainable at this time, but I won't go so far as to say that proves they're flying saucers. There's a difference between, I don't know what it was, and, oh, it's an alien spacecraft. I never make that leap. It's inappropriate to make that. What were its characteristics that rule out conventional explanations, even if you don't know what it was?
Of all the UFO episodes in Mexico, few caused the pervasive excitement shown in this video. The tape was made during an unprecedented multiple sighting, perhaps the most widely witnessed UFO incident in history.
In January 1st, 1994, Mexico City, the whole city stopped. I mean, stopped. People were driving cars and they stopped the car to look to the sky, and millions saw UFOs. This was in every newscast, in the television, in the radio. This news was reported in every single newspaper in Mexico City. An incredible event. An event that would demonstrate the presence of these objects, especially in this country. What is amazing for us, the Mexicans, is that nobody else around the world knew what happened in Mexico.
The wave of sightings, ongoing since 1991, is notable for both the astonishing number of videos it has produced and the willingness of Jaime Maussan and other journalists to treat the matter seriously.
I thought about it in 1991, if I wanted to do this, if I wanted to get involved with something so controversial as UFOs. But the truth is the truth, and if you like the truth, you go behind the truth. It doesn't matter how risky it is. And as a journalist, I want to have the big scoop of all times. And this is the biggest scoop of all times. It's risky, yes, you have to have courage. Yes, you have. But I think it's worth it.
However, according to at least one researcher, Mexico's UFOs are not the ultimate journalistic scoop, but byproducts of geological forces as old as time. UFOs have been playing hide-and-seek with Earthlings for decades. Even as we open the door to the 21st century, no one has proven where UFOs come from and just what it is they want. If cave paintings, biblical accounts, and Renaissance artworks can be taken at face value, the guessing game has actually gone on for thousands of years. But some investigators have advanced a fresh theory to explain UFOs. Simply put, they are not objects from outer space, but a whole spectrum of luminous phenomena that originate within the core of the Earth itself.
The Earth is a massively complex laboratory. There are an infinite number of forces that are interacting, and we really don't understand those as yet in any great depth. And the Earth does produce lights. It has its light show. And I think they're older than the human race. They belong to the very body of the Earth.
Among these exotic natural wonders are earthquake lights and ball lightning. Scientists believe that earthquake lights occur both before and after tremors, when gas released from within the Earth suddenly ignites and shoots sparks into the atmosphere. Ball lightning is believed to be an accumulation of static electricity that not only becomes visible, but is also capable of moving in the air and along hard surfaces. To those who have studied UFOs, however, even the most spectacular natural phenomenon can only explain a few unidentified flying objects.
When you look at a range of UFO reports that have been made over the years, and thousands, presumably some small fraction of them, if they're under the right conditions, in the right place at the right time, some of these kinds of phenomena have to be considered. But by and large, from what I've read and what I've seen, they don't really fit.
In this ongoing debate, another type of naturally occurring luminous display is often cited to explain UFOs. They are known as Earth lights.
The characteristics that probably distinguish Earth lights from earthquake lights or ball lightning are that they tend to last for longer. And they often haunt particular areas like a valley, like a mountain. In China, for example, Mount Wutai-Shan and Mount Omai, there are temples that have been built specifically because light phenomena occur there. And the people who built the temples thought these lights were an expression of the Dharma. But that indicates to you how long lights were seen in that area, centuries.
Despite such ancient traditions, no one can explain exactly how Earth lights are created.
We are testing theories, and one of the strongest contenders is that tectonic stresses in the Earth, through the Earth's geology, not necessarily related actually to an earthquake, though it can be, that these stresses produce tremendous force fields, and that through whatever mechanisms we don't really understand yet, plasmas are produced.
Proponents of this naturalistic theory suggest that plasmas, luminous clusters of charged particles, explain even the most well-known UFO sightings.
And I should also say, if we go back to Kenneth Arnold's flight over the Cascade Mountains, he saw 9 objects of light. And at that time, the Cascade Mountains, which we know are tectonically volatile, they were building up to their largest earthquake ever recorded at that time.
On April 4th, 1949, Seattle, Washington crumbled under the impact of that earthquake. However, it hit more than 18 months after Kenneth Arnold's sighting. Could there have been a link?
Sounds good. Yes, luminous phenomena produced by earthquakes. Yes, people see sometimes luminous phenomena around flying saucers. Fine, that doesn't make a cause and effect connection at all.
Yet according to the Earth lights theory, masses of plasma do exhibit some of the distinctive qualities of UFOs.
The interesting thing about these plasmas is that at night they will shine. They will be your lights in the sky. But in daylight, a plasma can seem to reflect light and look metallic.
But are qualities of reflectivity and a metallic appearance enough to equate plasmas with UFOs?
If they're going to talk natural phenomenon, what is there out there that has a capability to hover and then shuts off and then the object zooms straight up out of sight? There's no technology like that we know about. And there's certainly no natural phenomenon that does this kind of thing. This ain't nothing we're familiar with. This is something very strange.
In order to be mistaken for UFOs, these natural Earth-light plasmas would have to display some extraordinary capabilities, like those witnessed in 1980 at Bentwaters Air Base, or in 1967 near the Canadian town of Shag Harbor.
Well, some of them can sit on the water and have been observed going underneath water as well. Some just come out of the ground, that's where they come from initially, and some of them will just sit there, or some will flash off over the hill and come down again, earth themselves again.
According to its proponents, the Earthlight phenomenon is the best and the only explanation for UFOs.
I think if we understand Earthlight and all the range of phenomena associated with them, quantum physics and plasma physics will literally take a quantum leap. They will literally move ahead a decade, probably one fell swoop.
Still, UFO researchers point out what they see as a fatal flaw in the plasma Earthlight theory.
We have to look at the characteristics of the earthquake lights or the plasmas or ball lightning or any of these things. How do they move? What color are they? What size are they? These are important considerations. Then look at the same data for UFOs. Well, the typical even landed saucer is 10 to 30 feet in diameter. These plasma phenomena are literally this big. So it's the careful consideration of what are the characteristics. If you're trying to explain this with this, they have to match.
Perhaps not surprisingly, the ongoing wave of Mexico City UFOs has been swept up in this controversy. Many of the mysterious lights appeared in the vicinity of the nearby volcano, Popocatépetl. It is a matter of record that the long-dormant volcano suddenly became active, precisely at the time the sightings began. During a research trip to Mexico in August of 1999, Paul Devereaux visited the ancient city of Teotihuacan, some 50 miles from the volcano, and theorized about the connection.
This place is very active and volatile in a tectonic fashion. And what we found that these earthlights do frequent areas where there are active surface tectonic geological faults. And this is a prime location for that phenomenon to occur. And I think is one of the elements bound up into the whole Mexican UFO wave.
The questions of whether UFOs are real or if life exists elsewhere in the universe may not be resolved by earthbound debate. There is, however, another approach. Build a rocket, blast off, and see for ourselves. Ancient civilizations who weren't yet blessed by the invention of electricity enjoyed at least one compensation. Their pristine night skies sparkled with 1,000,000 stars. Early astronomers soon noticed that a handful of heavenly bodies traveled freely in the sky, unbound by the stars' slow, methodical rotation. The Greeks called them planets, a word meaning wanderer. In modern times, when Earthlings began to ponder the question of UFOs and alien civilization, it was the planet Mars that became the focus of attention. If there truly were flying saucers, it was thought they would come from the mysterious red planet. In part, this belief stemmed from observations made by astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli in 1877. He claimed that Mars was laced with channels, canali in Italian, that linked the planet's polar ice caps. Schiaparelli's canali became known as canals, and some said they were not simply natural waterways.
An American astronomer named Lowell thought that these were canals that were artificially created by an alien civilization, and he began studying Mars extensively and writing books about the civilization on Mars that created these structures. And so a lot of people began thinking then about how you would communicate with the Martians.
The widespread public belief that Martians were real became clear when 32 million people gathered around their radios in October of 1938.
We interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At least 40 people, including 6 state troopers, lie dead.
Millions believed that the H.G. Wells radio drama War of the Worlds was a real report of a Martian invasion. The result was widespread panic. The director, Orson Welles, was unaware that his production would strike a nerve.
I'm of course surprised that the H.G. Wells classic, which is the original for many fantasies about invasions by mythical monsters from the planet Mars had such an immediate and profound effect upon radio listeners.
While the public was captivated by stories about Mars, a lone American pioneer named Robert Goddard was experimenting with ways of actually getting there.
Goddard had come up with ingenious designs for getting rockets from the surface of the Earth up into the high atmosphere, but this was widely regarded as a bunch of silly nonsense by American scientists. However, in Germany, he had some fans, people like Werner von Braun, who were reading his research, and they then were inspired to implement his designs and improve upon them in Germany, and this led during World War II to the development of the V-2 rocket, which is the predecessor for basically the American and Russian space programs.
With the launch of America's Viking space probe in June of 1975, the age-old dream of exploring Mars finally became a reality. A vehicle known as a lander actually touched down on the surface of Mars July 20th, 1976. The Viking mission showed that the surface of Mars is pockmarked with craters, like those on Earth's moon. There were also some indications that life may have existed on Mars in distant times.
My personal feeling is that yes, Mars had a very substantial atmosphere early on with a lot of liquid water on the surface, and perhaps enough to form these river channels and river valleys that we see that are quite ancient, that are perhaps older than 3 billion years old. So the issue of the ancient climate of Mars is an important one for the issue of whether life could evolve. I think you can start to persuade yourself that the possibility of life could be somewhat reasonable, actually, and particularly if you accept the postulate that if life can't exist, it will exist.
The life on Mars debate heated up again with the release of this picture, taken by Viking on July 25th, 1976. It appears to show a giant monument, a mile-long structure that resembles a human head. It became known as the face on Mars. NASA has no official position on whether the face is a natural feature or a colossal sculpture. Still, those who worked on the Viking mission have been accused of hiding the discovery of a Martian civilization.
I can't think of a group that would have publicized that possibility or that discovery more than those of us who were looking at the pictures. We were looking for stuff like that. Our careers would have been made. We would have loved to have trumpeted to the world that we found evidence of an ancient Martian civilization. Who the heck wouldn't? And after somebody pointed that out, those of us on the lander team looked at one of the boulders on the surface nearby the lander, and we decided we could see the initials of every team member in the boulder that was about 10 feet away from the lander.
NASA is currently building vehicles that will orbit and land on Mars in the next decade, in preparation for a daring attempt to send astronauts to the planet in 2018. But recent discoveries have allowed scientists to study Mars right here at home. During the 1980s and 90s, NASA plucked a dozen meteorites from the icy expanse of Antarctica, and then made the remarkable announcement that they were nothing less than small fragments of the planet Mars.
You might reasonably wonder, how do we know that a particular rock that we find on the Earth is from Mars? And the reason is we've been to Mars with the Viking landers, so we have actual measurements of the chemical composition of the Martian atmosphere, and we find that in these dozen rocks that there are the chemical signature of the atmosphere of Mars. It's not quite like Earth air, it's just like Martian air, and that's how we know they really are from Mars.
Scientists believe the rocks were blasted off Mars 16 million years ago when an asteroid collided with the planet. The meteorites made their way here, finally landing on Earth about 13,000 years later. After gathering and analyzing these otherworldly stones, researchers released some astonishing results.
One of those rocks was the Martian meteorite that some scientists claimed had evidence of Martian microbes on it. This has been greatly debated among scientists, and I would say today the consensus is moving in the direction of skepticism. That is, most scientists who've looked at the question think that the little objects that are seen under the microscope are probably not from living things that were produced by some non-biological process. But there are still a few scientists who find evidence in the chemistry and in the structure that maybe these were microbes after all. So it's still an open question.
And the important thing out of all of this is not so much whether these particular meteorites have actual biological material in them, but it's opened people's minds to at least accept the possibility that this may be something that could occur, and has opened this area for legitimate study.
Jupiter's frozen moon, Europa, may also be able to support life. In 1996, images transmitted by the spacecraft Galileo showed that Europa has an ocean containing more water than all of the Earth's oceans combined. And according to scientists, where there is water, there can be life.
There could be volcanic activity down under a liquid water ocean, and it's possible even that volcanic activity is helping to keep that liquid water layer there. If that's true, then you can start to think about biological systems that relate to the kinds of systems we have on the Earth. It's all highly speculative, of course, but it's the kind of thing that drives us as scientists to want to know more about a place like Europa.
Ultimately, these interplanetary missions bolster the theory that life is not unique to Earth, a fundamental assumption if UFOs are to be taken seriously.
I think it strengthens the hand of the people who believe that life is fairly commonplace within the galaxy and within the universe, because now we don't have just one example, we've got two or more examples nearby. So that's why this becomes of profound importance, perhaps one of the most profoundly important things that man has ever done.
Despite the promise of discovering life in distant galaxies, current rocket technology may put the brakes on expeditions into deep space. It would simply take too long to get there. The Voyager 2 spacecraft was the fastest vehicle ever built by humans, but it still took 9 years to reach the planet Uranus, merely halfway to the edge of the solar system. To reach stars where life-supporting planets might be found, even Voyager would require a journey of 100,000 years. In the face of such daunting realities, science has come up with another way of reaching out to alien civilizations. Aim a hypersensitive radio antenna to the heavens and hope to strike up a long-distance conversation. It was in 1896 that an Italian engineer named Guglielmo Marconi hooked up some electrical parts in an inspired combination. Then he sent a signal roughly 1 mile, not over wires, but directly through thin air. Marconi refined his invention, and in 1901 he sent the first radio broadcast across the Atlantic Ocean. A message that would have taken Christopher Columbus several months to deliver could now be sent in the blink of an eye. Within a few decades, radio had taken its place at the center of modern life. Sports, politics, entertainment, and commerce were revolutionized by the ability of sound and music to travel magically through the air.
People began listening for Martians. They began to wonder, is there a Martian civilization that might be signaling to us? People like Marconi listened for these, and they occasionally announced that they had discovered signals from Mars. We now think that that was probably wrong, because there was a type of signal that they were probably picking up that they didn't know about then, but we now understand. This is a strange kind of signal called a whistler. It's produced by lightning, but it's lightning that's been transformed by the Earth's atmosphere into a strange signal that sounds just like a whistle. Like that. And so you get what sounds like an artificial signal, but it isn't.
The intergalactic eavesdropping continues today, but with far more powerful receivers. These are radio telescopes pointed toward the heavens in a search for faint signals from outer space. Some physicists believe they may well hold our best chance of contact with intelligent beings from other planets. At Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Earth's most sophisticated detector in the search for life in outer space is being updated in a laboratory. It will look for answers to one of humanity's oldest questions: is anybody out there? The project is headed by Dr. Paul Horowitz.
First and foremost, for a signal generated by an intelligent species somewhere else, we have to guess what kind of signal that might be. First of all, is it light? Is it radio waves? Is it particles? Best guess is it's radio waves. Best guess amongst the radio wave possibilities are microwaves. What kind of signal there? It's anyone's guess. Some people believe a carrier, a single long transmission, a transmitter left on, probably saying nothing, just saying I'm here.
Of course, radio has been around for over 100 years, but only in the last decade have computers become powerful enough for SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Specialized chips and circuit boards comprise the brain of the radio telescope system. It will process the stream of signals captured by a giant antenna.
Our search uses an 84-foot steerable radio telescope. Looks like a backyard satellite dish, but much bigger. It can collect rather weak signals and concentrate them at the focus. There we have some very sensitive amplifiers, the best that can be made these days, to strengthen that very weak signal.
The tiny signals will be transmitted through cables into the control room, where an array of computers will sort through the cosmic noise, looking for a deliberate signal, a sign of intelligent life.
Occasionally we find strange signals there, really interesting signals that look like the kind of thing that might be produced artificially by another civilization. But if you got a repeat of the signal at the same frequency and the same point in the sky, that would tell you it was not a random event on the surface of the Earth or inside of your computer. We would have to say that it's most likely being produced by another civilization some distance away. The problem is none of these signals has ever repeated, but it's enough to keep us intrigued and wanting to continue.
But what are the odds that we will get a signal from some exotic civilization?
That there's other life in the universe, guaranteed. That there's other life in the galaxy, guaranteed. Any odds you like, absolutely cannot be any other way. That there's advanced life somewhere in the universe, guaranteed. Somewhere else in the galaxy, so extremely probable that I would give you at least 100 to 1 odds that interstellar communication could well be taking place.
Even with these unbeatable odds, the quest for radio contact faces at least one possibly insurmountable obstacle.
A lot of people, both scientists and people who are critical of SETI, have said maybe an advanced civilization would use some equipment that's far beyond anything we could possibly know about, and so SETI isn't even worth doing. And that's possible. It could be that there's some technique for communicating across the distances between stars that we have no conception of and we will not be able to do for 1,000 years. But they probably thought about this too. And they probably went into their museum and they said, what did we use 1,000,000 years ago in the primitive part of our civilization to communicate across distances? And they said, oh, there's this thing they used to call radio. And that's what we could use if we wanted to communicate with a primitive civilization that doesn't know the advanced stuff that we know. So I'm hoping that they're using the galactic equivalent of Boy Scout technology to send a signal that a civilization as primitive as we are could detect.
If such a scenario plays out, we may be able to achieve distant rather than close encounters with extraterrestrial beings. Dr. Horowitz believes that one day SETI will indeed receive a message from other intelligent life in the universe.
And this will be quite an event. This will be the first bridge across 4 billion years of independent life start and evolution. It'll be the end of Earth's cultural isolation in a galaxy and a universe containing surely millions of other civilizations. It will be without doubt the greatest discovery in the history of humankind.
Until that broadcast is received, we remain the eyes and ears of the universe, ever alert for a tiny signal that tells us we are not alone. However, during the 1980s, some UFO researchers came to believe that there were abundant signs right here on Earth that visitors from outer space had made contact. The clues were the so-called crop circles, large and often intricate patterns carved into fields of grain across Britain.
Crop circles were connected to the UFO phenomena beginning in the early 80s, soon after they appeared in England, because people figured round marks on the ground, gee, they're like UFO traces that UFOs have left before, so why not UFOs causing these things? Because they are mysterious, they can't seem to find the source of them.
These mysterious forms began to appear in Bratton, Wiltshire, England, around 1980. Farmers here called the simple shapes corn circles and wrote them off as a quirk of nature. But the months and years that followed brought an explosion of new sightings. Crop circle magazines soon emerged to publicize the elaborate and beautiful patterns that were now visiting other crops. Researchers who call themselves cereologists stepped in to catalog these strange patterns and discover common traits. But are crop circles evidence of alien visitors? To solve the mystery, a commercial film company in England undertook a nighttime stakeout of a cornfield in Wiltshire in 1991. It was here that filmmakers made a startling discovery. Thermal imaging equipment revealed the faint outline of humanoid shapes moving in a circle. The shapes were in fact quite human. They belonged to a pair of Englishmen named Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley. Doug and Dave claimed responsibility for dozens of the complex patterns that had caused so much mystery. Many circles, the twosome pointed out, were even signed with their initials, D and D.
The circles that we created in 1978 with the standing walls of corn as if they'd been cut out of pastry with a knife, they were our doing, and we started it way back in that time.
However, numerous crop circles have now been observed in Canada and the United States, in addition to those that continue to appear all across England.
Doug and Dave didn't make those. They would have to have been lickety-split all over the planet. Having said that, that doesn't mean I find a UFO connection. There really aren't any good cases of people seeing the saucer making the crop circle. It's another one of these interesting anomalies that should be studied at the university level and isn't being.
Even without crop circles, most UFO researchers believe that unexplained photos and irrefutable eyewitness testimony make the case that UFOs are real and visiting Earth with alarming regularity. Virtually all of us have heard of UFOs, but relatively few of us have ever seen one. How are we to pass judgment on the question of whether or not they are real? Making such a decision is like being a juror and weighing evidence on one of the most important issues facing humanity. Perhaps UFOs are nothing more than hoaxes or mistaken observations, but if they are real, they have to come from someplace. The universe offers infinite possibilities. If there is life out there, it may well have gotten going long before we did. Indeed, Zeta Reticuli, a pair of stars often mentioned as having planets that might support life, is known to be about 1 billion years older than the Earth.
The thing we need to keep in perspective, we've only had fancy technology, call it 100 years. Well, the Zeta Reticulians got a billion-year head start. Let's be conservative. Let's suppose they only got a million-year head start. Let's be truly conservative and say they only got a 10,000-year head start, which is nothing out of the billion years available. Surely we would all agree that we can't even imagine the advanced technology there.
If some advanced civilization built spacecraft that can actually whisk them through the universe, why would they want to visit a primitive galactic backwater like Earth?
One can only postulate that they're concerned about their own survival and security. At the end of World War II, there were 3 signs visible to any alien visitor that soon this primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare would be bothering them.
Rockets, radar, and nuclear weapons were three signs that Earthlings might soon be a force to contend with in the interstellar neighborhood. If there are other civilizations in the universe, perhaps they felt the need to keep a watchful eye on potentially threatening developments here on Earth.
There had been many, many sightings over air bases in the West, over classified atomic installations. They were not just randomly distributed, but they did seem to concentrate, at least in the early years, on places where experimental research was being done, this kind of thing.
Statistically, astronomers know that there's life out there somewhere, and the chances of it being intelligent life is debatable, but it's possible that somewhere in the universe there are creatures like us. Now, whether they're coming here is a very tricky question because we don't have the physical evidence. We don't have the chunk of saucer in our hand, and abductees haven't brought back a towel from the Zeta Reticuli Hilton. We don't have any of the good stuff that definitely proves that somebody has been here.
What the UFO case lacks in physical evidence, it makes up for in solid eyewitnesses. The Air Force UFO investigations from 1948 to 1969 cataloged some 12,000 sightings. Most were explained, but 700 accounts from credible witnesses remain a mystery, despite all the Air Force efforts to explain them.
They used all kinds of tricks to misrepresent what the results were, always focusing on only 700 couldn't be explained. Only? If I was looking for cures for cancer and I looked at 12,000 chemicals, would I say there is no cure because only 700 worked? The point is to find one.
But even accounts from seemingly unimpeachable eyewitnesses are not enough, at least when the subject is UFOs.
When you get down to it, what we have always is a story. I saw something. I saw a light in the sky. I saw a crashed flying saucer. And a story is mythology. It is not in and of itself proof.
Yet videos and photographs add powerful support to eyewitness accounts of UFOs. Many photos have been examined by experts who have found no evidence of fraud or alteration. However, if it can be proved beyond a reasonable doubt that UFOs are real, we have only unleashed a new problem.
The UFO phenomenon is a great challenge to our intellect, but even more, it's a challenge to our humility. That mankind likes to think he's in control. And if we take this subject seriously, we realize we're not. And I believe that mankind, across cultures, is fundamentally in psychological denial on this subject. We don't know how to cope with it emotionally. We can't even begin to grasp it intellectually.
Perhaps UFOs will one day be revealed as top-secret fighter planes, more advanced and alien-looking than the F-117. Or UFOs may prove to be nothing more exotic than birds or weather balloons, as laughable as our ancestors' belief in witches and sea serpents. Of course, it is entirely possible that UFOs are exactly what they seem to be. Alien aircraft from parts unknown. For the time being, at least, the truth about UFOs is in the eye of the beholder.
Josh is heading for the glacial ranges of Patagonia to examine the remains of a vanished tribe of giants and to attempt to solve one of the greatest riddles of our time.
The word Patagonia itself means big feet? Who knew?
The Giants of Patagonia on Digging for the Truth, tonight at 9 on the History Channel.
That's huge.
It is one of the most bizarre UFO stories ever told. Aurora, Texas, April 17, 1897. Witnesses report a flying airship 5 years before the Wright brothers take flight.
Whatever was flying over Texas in 1897 was not man-made.
Evidence exists that shows that a UFO crashed at this site in 1897.
In the wreckage, a small, badly disfigured body is discovered. Described in newspapers as not an inhabitant of this world, he is buried in a local cemetery, and a legend is born. Some call it town folklore. Others call it the biggest event in human history.
There's a better example of a UFO. I don't know what it is.
Fact or fiction, truth or myth. Join us as we open the UFO files on Texas's Roswell. The 1947 Roswell incident may be the most famous UFO crash story of all time. But was it the first? On April 17, 1897, a mysterious airship was seen in the skies over the small Fort Worth suburb of Aurora, Texas, on a collision course with the home of a local judge.
The story of the Aurora crash is fairly simple and straightforward. According to the newspaper accounts at the time, early in the morning of April 17, 1897, a large silver cigar-shaped object came fluttering closer and closer to the earth, struck a tower at Judge Proctor's house, exploded, scattering debris all over the place.
2 days later, April 19, 1897, the Dallas Morning News reported,
about 6 o'clock this morning, the early risers of Aurora were astonished at the sudden appearance of the airship which has been sailing through the country. It was traveling due north and much nearer the earth than ever before. It sailed directly over the public square, and when it reached the north part of town, collided with the tower of Judge Proctor's windmill and went into pieces with a terrific explosion. Scattering debris over several acres of ground, wrecking the windmill and water tank, and destroying the judge's flower garden.
According to the local legend, many of Aurora's residents raced to Judge J.S. Proctor's farm to help in any way they could. What they found was beyond comprehension. The Dallas Morning News reported that someone or something was in the craft.
The pilot of the ship is supposed to have been the only one on board, and while his remains were badly disfigured, enough of the original has been picked up to show that he was not an inhabitant of this world. Mr. T.J. Weems, the United States Army Signal Services officer at this place and an authority on astronomy, gives it as his opinion that the pilot was a native of the planet Mars.
His description was that it was an alien in form, and he was referred to as a Martian. Now, the only reference to Martians at that time were in the drawings of the science fiction writers, so it could have been sparked in part by literature.
Of course, I wasn't there, so I can't say for sure who piloted the craft. All I can go is by the newspaper accounts, and they made it quite clear that the remains clearly indicated he was not an inhabitant of this world.
According to the Fort Worth Register, the alien did not survive. They reported that he was given a Christian burial in the town cemetery.
The fragments of the craft were then thrown down a well. The townspeople more or less wanted to forget about it, and I won't say pretend it didn't happen, but probably couldn't cope with what happened and didn't know.
A small stone was placed over the unmarked plot to confirm the grave of the airship pilot. But as time passed, he would not be allowed to rest in peace. Years have gone by, leaving fewer and fewer eyewitnesses to the events of April 1897. Eventually, the story became a legend, a colorful tale that some considered to be fiction. Judge Proctor's land was sold. The newspapers stopped writing about the incident in Aurora, and the gravesite became little more than a curiosity.
My initial reaction to the Aurora story, I have to admit, was a little bit of one of skepticism. But if you're going to be a history writer, you need to at least make a stab at trying to find out the truth. And that's what launched my investigation. When I began to research it, however, I found that there was more to the story than just the Aurora incident. I went to the Dallas Morning News, assuming that the Aurora story would be a headline on page 1. Well, it wasn't. It was buried in the middle of page 5. And what intrigued me was it wasn't even the first airship story on that page.
In fact, there were over a dozen different articles about the mysterious airships listed in the April 19th edition of the paper.
There were at least 16 in that same area the 2 days before this incident. 16 reported cases by reputable people is significant.
In late November 1896, thousands of witnesses reported seeing the mysterious airship 1,500 miles away over California. Over the next few months, the tale spread to more than 20 additional states from California to Michigan. In Texas alone, the airship was spotted in over 30 counties between April and May of 1897.
For those 2 months in 1897, literally hundreds of Texans saw something in the night air over Texas. They described it as cigar-shaped. Some people said it had lights. Some people said it didn't. Some said it could go 200, 150, 300 miles an hour. It could do things that airships today can barely do.
Top speed at that time was about 35 to 40 miles an hour by train. And for reputable people to say something flew over their head going more than 100 miles an hour would be the same as us saying something went over our head going thousands of miles an hour.
Texas historian Wallace Cheriton focused his research on the incident on the so-called witnesses listed in the newspaper articles.
What I was trying to do was prove, were these real people? I was very pleased to find, yes, they were. They were, in fact, real people.
When I first heard the stories of the airships, that excited me. It wasn't a lone incident. People across the country were experiencing something. That gave it validity. What were they seeing? Why were they seeing it?
I'm not sure that we'll ever know what they were seeing. What I am sure is they saw something. Could it have been a balloon? Perhaps. Probably not an airplane, since those didn't exist.
The first recorded man-made heavier-than-air flight was made, of course, by the Wright brothers in December of 1903 at Kitty Hawk. So whatever was flying over Texas in 1897 was not man-made.
In fact, while hot air balloons were commonly used in the late 1800s, they were not able to perform complicated maneuvers, such as right-angle turns and rapid altitude changes that had been described by witnesses. Patents had been registered for more advanced airships, but there is no record of any actually flying during that period.
We're talking about something that did not exist in 1897 and yet was seen by literally thousands of people. If there's a better example of a UFO, I don't know what it is.
Soon after the Aurora crash was reported, the sightings ended. Suddenly, there were questions. Were these sightings real, or were they all part of a gigantic hoax?
If you subtract out the known hoaxes, if you forget about them, what you're left with are hundreds of sightings by just common, everyday people that had absolutely no motive other than the fact, I saw something and I want to report it.
Over the years, we investigate hundreds, thousands of UFO reports. They're seen, they land, and they fly away. This was something where it was seen, crashed, and left behind an occupant. That's why, to me, Aurora was the best airship case to investigate. And then, it's before Roswell. No one's gone in to cover it up. They didn't know about it. So that, to me, was the ultimate case to get the evidence I needed to prove or disprove what was going on.
Coming up, the investigation focuses on the alien on board.
We sent a letter and asked permission to exhume the body.
Aurora, Texas, 1897. 50 years before Roswell. newspapers reported a major crash and a dead spaceman buried in the Aurora Cemetery. But as time went by, the story was lost. Then, 70 years later, it resurfaced.
Well, in 1973, Bill Case started writing articles for the Dallas Morning News, and that spread over the countryside. The interest jumped because, again, somebody was resurrecting the old Aurora crash in 1897.
The legend was reborn. Ufologists across the country scrambled to uncover the truth behind the possible alien graveyard. Hayden Hughes, the founder of the International UFO Bureau, was among the first to arrive in Aurora.
Aurora was the outstanding case to me because of the crash of one of the airships for study, and for the remains of a pilot to be studied or exhumed if he was buried.
Aurora was different. There was a body, a supposed alien body.
There's very few retrievable corpses or bodies associated with UFOs, but none that can be documented as well as the Aurora case. My belief in what the occupant pilot was what it was said, that it was the pilot of what the craft was. His description was that it was an alien in form.
It was small in stature, which would confirm the type of creatures that are seen most frequently aboard UFOs. They are small in stature, childlike in size.
The body, the crash site, the remnants of the airship. To Hughes, these had to be either the real thing or a hoax, and it was worth investigating.
As to what to expect when we came to Aurora that first time, I was quite surprised that it wasn't as big as I visualized it to be. Coming into town, where was it? Well, we just went through it. There's the cemetery, okay? There's the hill, the windmills over this way. There's some houses down this way are businesses. That was the extent of it.
Another surprise, Hughes's reception by the residents of Aurora. It appeared that they had no interest in solving the mystery.
One time you talked, the people were open. The next time, they were not. We were allowed in the cemetery on some occasions. On some occasions, we were barred and could not go in the cemetery. So the emotional level of the town kind of told me they wanted no involvement with it. I had gone from extreme excitement and the possibility of what we could get to a frustration in that it was like the town was against us from the beginning.
Then Hughes and other UFO researchers in Aurora had a breakthrough, the discovery of first-hand accounts of the crash. The witnesses were less than perfect. Some memories had faded, others were incomplete, and eyewitnesses were now in their 80s. Ufologist Jim Mars was among the first to interview the residents.
In 1973, I interviewed 3 people who were alive at the time. One, Robbie Hansen, said it was a hoax, but then by her own story, she was not a direct witness, had no direct knowledge of it. Her father was told about it, he laughed, thought it was a hoax, and that stuck in her mind.
But then, Mars discovered 2 witnesses who contradicted Hansen and offered first-hand accounts of the actual crash.
There's Mary Evans, who did recall that something crashed. Her parents went to look at the wreckage but would not let her go. So we have kind of an indirect witness there who says it did happen. And then we've got Charlie Stevens, who is a 10-year-old boy, was out doing the chores and actually told me he saw the thing go over. He said it was trailing smoke and it seemed to be in trouble. He saw it disappear towards Aurora, heard the explosion, saw smoke going up. He wanted to go up and see what had happened, but his father, this old farmer in 1897, said, "No, son, we have to finish the chores." And he said his father went up into town the next day and came back and told him about all the wreckage that was lying around. So the preponderance of the eyewitness testimony leans towards something happened.
In addition to eyewitness accounts, researchers located one man who added a new twist to the investigation. Aurora resident Brawley Oates, who suffered from an extreme case of rheumatoid arthritis, believed his debilitating health condition was somehow connected to the Aurora legend.
Brawley Oates lived at the site of the crash. I believe he moved there in 1945. And when he moved there, he had the well cleaned out because it had all this metal stuff and debris down in it. And he needed to use it for water. Oates believes that the water in that well that he and his family drank for about 12 years affected their health drastically. In fact, he developed some of the worst arthritis conditions in his hands and other things that anybody has seen.
I don't see how a person could survive or could walk or could function in any way. And basically it was, they would either swell up so big that they would burst. And at times probably bigger than golf balls on your fingers. And he claimed that it was from maybe the water from the well that they used. That's the way he told it.
Brawley Oates told me that it was because of radiation from the well where people had thrown pieces of this Aurora spaceship.
But in sealing off the well on his property, Oates also sealed crucial evidence to the mystery inside. For researchers, the scientific evidence to support their case was becoming increasingly difficult to find.
We can't go on legends. We need scientific proof that you could take any court of law and prove that this event actually took place, as our investigation disclosed.
In 1973, investigators set out to the crash site and the graveyard. They hoped to find any evidence that could have survived the 75 years since the crash. Coming up, mysterious metal samples baffle the experts.
It's just a marvelous thing to have a piece of something you believe really could have come from a spaceship.
In the 1973 investigation, researchers found witnesses that authenticated an airship crash in April 1897. There were also claims of an alien buried in the local cemetery. But even with personal testimonies, ufologists realized that they needed scientific evidence. They hoped to find debris from the crash on the property formerly owned by Judge J.S. Proctor.
What happened to the metal is probably anyone's guess at this point. The best guess to me was the main bulk of it was hauled off, and what was left behind was thrown down the well.
Finding the well was easy, but researchers quickly discovered a problem. The well had been sealed off years earlier by the new property owner, Brawley Oates.
He had this big slab of 8 by 8 feet concrete over the old well. So to move that would be a major job.
Discouraged, investigators turned their search for clues to other parts of the property.
They went around and they got the little pinging of the machine, and they dig down and they find pieces of stuff. And some of the things they found were natural things you would find on a piece of property that had been around for years and had been farmed.
Nails, bolts, and many other identifiable items were dug up at the crash site. But then, something caught their attention.
One of the fellows from Corpus Christi, Texas, found a piece that was very significant that MUFON has actually had analyzed by John Schuessler.
This was tested 2 times. In 1973, immediately after it was taken out of the ground, it was transmitted to me, and I took it into an aerospace laboratory. This laboratory was one that was used to determine the failure modes of aircraft and spacecraft parts. So they had the latest and best equipment. They're the ones that did the first analysis and determined the unusual nature of it. The analysis showed it had been there for a long, long time. And then when you cut into the metal, they were 95% pure aluminum and 5% iron. 5% iron in solution in aluminum is a no-no. It doesn't mix that way. It's like less than 1% normally. And when there is iron, there is usually zinc or other materials. There was none of that in this case.
Although the major aerospace laboratory that initially tested the sample has asked to remain anonymous for this program, Schuessler verified the results with the Anastas Laboratories in Houston, Texas. According to Schuessler, both laboratories reached the same conclusion. Intrigued, he had the laboratories continue their tests on the sample to further determine the object's origin.
The stories were that this thing exploded. It blew molten material out of this vast explosion mess, and that material hit things and dried and cooled. Well, the structural analysis of the material showed that it was air-cooled on the ground after it had been molten in the air. So the structure was perfect to fit the story.
Has Schuessler uncovered the smoking gun to the Aurora crash?
The material found and analyzed in 1973 couldn't have been made at that time on that farm or in the town of Aurora or anywhere around there, but it had to have been made in a very sophisticated laboratory using ultra-pure refining techniques. It's just a marvelous thing to have a piece of something you believe really could have come from a spaceship.
Newspapers were quick to jump on the story of the new investigations into the airship crash, and as a result, the accuracy of the reporting suffered. Such was the case with a different sample sent to Dr. Tom Gray, now a professor emeritus at Kansas State University.
One day there was a knock at my door, and a gentleman came in, and he had in his possession pieces that he had found at the reported site of the spaceship crash in 1897.
Dr. Gray's colleague asked him to analyze the samples to determine if this was a piece of the Aurora spaceship. What you are looking at is the actual artifact that was tested.
I showed this piece to my father-in-law a few days after I had done the analysis, and his first comment to me was, where did you get that water pump impeller? And so I kind of knew that that didn't come from a spaceship for sure.
Once he determined the first sample's mundane origin, Dr. Gray began testing the two remaining metal strips. Once he discovered the pieces were primarily iron, he made an unusual finding.
When I checked their magnetic properties, I did it by basically putting them in the presence of a magnet, and they didn't interact with that magnet, and I thought, that's kind of interesting.
Perplexed, Dr. Gray searched for a certified metallurgist to give a second opinion on his puzzling find.
It turns out that iron-zinc alloys can be non-magnetic or magnetic depending on how they're cooled.
Then, Dr. Gray relayed his story, along with his conclusions, to his school newspaper.
When the article came out the next day in the campus newspaper, the headline basically said, "Physicist finds non-magnetic iron at site of Aurora spaceship crash." There wasn't one word in that article at all about the fact that I needed to talk to the metallurgist to find out what these properties were. And, of course, then the cat was out of the bag, so to speak.
As a result, Dr. Gray, his findings, and the piece of the Aurora spaceship became a part of the legend. But this part of the saga was misrepresented.
Newspapers sometimes are in the business of reporting what they see as the news. That's not necessarily really what the news is. The real truth of the matter is, those materials were the kind of things you would have expected to find in a farmyard in Aurora, Texas.
Having gleaned all the evidence they could from the crash site, investigators now shifted their focus toward the Aurora Cemetery.
People said there was a body that was blown out of the craft and it was badly mangled. And the story was they gave it a Christian burial in the local cemetery.
We were trying to determine what was the oldest part of the cemetery. that was our logical place to start looking first.
They wandered around looking, and one of the local people said, those people aren't looking in the right place. You got to look for this 100-year-old gnarled oak tree. It's got a big beehive in it. So our investigators went there, and they found this small stone that looked like it had an etching of some kind of an airship.
Believing that they had finally found the spaceman's grave, investigators for the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON, made another startling discovery.
And when they went to the grave site where this piece of stone was, they got the same decibel reading on their metal detector that they did from where they picked the material up from the ground.
Walter Andrus, former international director of MUFON, believes there is a connection between the samples located at the crash site and what was reading inside the grave.
The fact that they detected metal down in this grave indicated that someone must have buried, along with the body, some of the metal fragments from the crash site, which gives it more importance because it ties the two together. To find out if there was something there, we sent a certified letter to each of the members of the Cemetery Association in Aurora and asked permission to exhume the body.
But it was fairly impossible to do that because the Cemetery Association was dead set against it, and they were getting an injunction to stop it. And in fact, the day that everybody wanted to descend on the cemetery, they asked the sheriff of Wise County to put some deputies out there, and he did.
He said, we don't want people coming into the cemetery and digging all over because we're very proud of what we have here, and we don't want to see a lot of excavation going on looking for a body. Well, it's frustrating because if we could found that, this would be one of the bigger events, and really would top off this whole investigation by coming up with an alien body.
After 2 weeks, the patrols ended, and MUFON investigators suffered a crushing blow to their research effort.
When we were able to get back to the grave site, the marker was gone. We don't know who took it or how.
Then, another blow.
Someone had driven a 3-inch pipe down into the earth there and apparently pulled the metal up in this 3-inch pipe. One of our MUFON investigators checked it and did not find any trace of metal with his metal detector.
What could have been evidence to authenticate the Aurora UFO mystery was gone. Coming up, skeptics fight back. Other explanations to the Aurora legend are far from being out of this world.
In Texas, we have an old saying that never let the truth stand in the way of a good story.
Was this really Texas's Roswell? That's what investigators in 1973 hoped to find out. But like the Roswell story in 1947, the Aurora, Texas legend grew larger and the story more twisted as each day passed. At every turn, skeptics challenged journalists and investigative agencies like the Mutual UFO Network and the International UFO Bureau, seeking to disprove their research. The theories ranged from balloons soaring through the sky to the belief the Aurora legend was merely concocted to save a dying town.
The most prevalent theory to explain the 1897 airship mystery is that it was a balloon. Well, unfortunately, there is physically no way it could have been a balloon. There are no balloons that can rise or fall with lightning speed. They cannot turn at right angles. They cannot go vertically up and vertically down. They simply can't do it.
I don't think the balloon theory is feasible in this because of the detailed descriptions of the different airships that were available at the time. The government, even in the 40s, tried to claim that different pilots were chasing balloons. Even the famous Roswell crash was a high-altitude balloon that had actually crashed. So the balloon theory has been there a long time.
With these facts, many dismissed the balloon theory. Other skeptics, however, theorize that the Aurora legend is simply a made-up story, invented by the author of the original Dallas Morning News article from April 19, 1897.
In my opinion, the Aurora story was one that was concocted by S.E. Hayden. I did find some people that seem to have recalled that their ancestors had said that Hayden was a great practical joker. And what a wonderful practical joke this was in 1897, except that it wasn't recognized at that.
I've heard the allegation that the author of this article, Mr. Hayden, was a prankster and a hoaxer. I've seen no hard evidence of that. And I've seen no other articles that he wrote that turned out to be wrong.
Although Cheriton is challenged by some experts, he offers a convincing argument to back up his claim.
If Hayden was acting as a reporter as opposed to a hoaxer, it seems very strange to me that he didn't follow the story up to say, well, people showed up for the burial of the alien and we put a little grave marker over it and somebody said a prayer. It was a wonderful ceremony. That to me would have been expected, but yet it didn't happen.
The mayor of Aurora, Texas, Barbara Brammer, has spent many years researching the town's history and believes her input may solve the Aurora legend.
The legend, from what I have been able to read, started after several disasters that we had in the city.
The first of those disasters was a brutal boll weevil infestation, which destroyed Aurora's primary cash crop, cotton.
Shortly thereafter, there was a fire on the west side of the town that destroyed several buildings and several people lost their lives.
And the deaths did not stop there. Shortly after the fire, a massive outbreak of spotted fever nearly wiped out the remaining population of Aurora.
It was in 1896. Everybody tried to leave it could. The whole city at one time was under quarantine, and the only time they left their houses was whenever they went to the cemetery to bury someone.
In the early 1890s, Aurora saw a glimmer of hope. The railroad was set to lay track in the town and provide much-needed economic relief for the townsfolk.
They got as far as laying a spur in this direction for the railroad, and then another railroad was going to be coming from out west, and it got within 27 miles of this before it was stopped. And it became known then as the railroad that never was.
The town was crippled economically, and the resident spirits were crushed. It is this string of events that some believe might provide the motive for the Aurora legend.
Aurora definitely needed the railroad to save everything that it had going for it at that time. When it didn't come through, it started downhill. People started moving away. I believe the people who were left in this town needed something to look forward to, and this could be the reason that someone made up the story.
Although Mayor Brammer's theory goes a long way to explaining the legend, skeptics continued their assault on believers.
The debunkers said Judge Proctor did not have a windmill, okay, so therefore the whole story is bogus. According to Charlie Stevens, no, he did not technically have a windmill, but he had a wooden derrick windlass, which is a wooden tower used to haul up the sump on his well. So that's a matter of semantics. There was a wooden tower there that the thing could have crashed into.
In order to find evidence, I found one of the metal angle brackets that supported the wood arm of the windlass. One metal bracket is still there at the scene.
Another element of the legend has come under attack from skeptics. The initial identity of the spaceman came from T.J. Weems, a local member of the U.S. Army Signal Corps. It is argued that Weems was only the town blacksmith and in no way an expert on astronomy like the newspaper claimed.
According to Charlie Stevens, T.J. Weems was also an amateur astronomer, had his own telescope, and was widely known as a lay expert on astronomy. So that argument that he didn't have any knowledge that's pretty specious too.
Despite the many explanations that researchers, journalists, and skeptics have for the Aurora legend, there is at least one thing that everyone can agree on.
As far as I'm concerned, it's still a good story.
It's a good story.
I wasn't around then, but my granddad could tell a pretty good story.
In Texas, we have an old saying that never let the truth stand in the way of a good story.
After 3 decades, Hayden Hughes returns to Aurora. But can he solve the riddle of the mysterious airship once and for all?
We have maybe one of the most scientific finds of the 20th century right here behind us.
It has been more than 100 years since the quiet of Aurora, Texas was allegedly shattered by the crash of a mysterious airship. Like the incident in Roswell, New Mexico, that supposedly took place in 1947, the truth may never be known. But to some ufologists, this case from 1897 may be the key to solving the whole UFO phenomena once and for all.
The significance of the Aurora encounter was that there was a body left to be studied, and that there were hundreds of sightings of the same description over the central United States during that time. We see what happened at Roswell, we see what happened at some other sightings, but this one held the answer, and because it was before modern day censorship, that's a key. It's still there. No one went in to cover it up.
While this former boomtown used to boast 3,000 inhabitants, there are only about 400 people living there today. The town may have decreased in size, but the controversy surrounding its most famous visitor has only grown. If nothing else, the tale of the mysterious airship crash has served to polarize Aurora, dividing believers from skeptics.
Aurora's big claim to fame has to be the legend. It's the thing that has lasted longer than anything else. Some people think it's a funny joke going around. They do not believe that this actually happened, and they'll laugh at you because they say it's such a hoax.
Well, we're dealing with belief systems here. And I found this when I first began to investigate this in the little town of Aurora. About half the people said, no, it was just a big hoax. And the other half said, no, it really happened.
I had a feeling that they thought people were laughing at the little town of Aurora, even though the population there now had absolutely nothing to do with the airship mystery. I just always got the sense that this is not something they wanted to embrace.
Despite the town's ambivalence towards its famous legend, in 1976 they installed a plaque at the cemetery that supposedly houses the aliens' remains. Since the actual stone marker was stolen more than 30 years ago, it is impossible to know the precise location of the pilot's body.
To me, the only thing at this point that would satisfy it, it's pretty obvious we're not going to find a grave site to dig in. So, secondary, let's go to the well.
Although the windmill above the well no longer exists, the former Proctor property was purchased by Brawley Oates in 1945. Long-standing rumors hold that the well on the property was contaminated by radioactive debris. More than 100 years later, the legend has also grown to include a mysterious patch of ground that lacks vegetation. When the mayor shared details of this rumor with Hayden Hughes in 2005, it renewed his interest in solving the mystery.
Aurora, to me, had the most possibility of providing evidence that could confirm or deny the existence of the airships and the occupant. And when we left empty-handed, I saw it kind of as a failure because the evidence was still there. Maybe 2 feet under where we were standing. But still, we were unable to walk away with something we could really go forth and say, all right, here's something. Let's investigate that further.
For the first time in over a quarter of a century, Hayden decided to revisit the place where it all began, the crash site.
This is the alleged crash site of the airship. We're on top of the hill, valley all the way around. This is where Proctor had his property. His windmill was here, and we had a well, which was later cemented in.
Certain areas are still accessible, but this fence stands in front of Judge Proctor's original well. Several requests to gain access to that part of the property were made for this program, but no calls were returned.
My gut feeling tells me we're onto it and there's something there, and I can't dispel that.
So close to where he feels the answers to the airship mystery lie, Hayden Hughes' frustration is palpable.
We have maybe one of the most scientific finds of the 20th century right here behind us, and we can't get to it because of this big bird cage that's been built over and cemented in, sealing below the evidence that may have contaminated the soil around it that is keeping vegetation from growing today. And if it could be possible to go down, dig up, whatever, that might be what it takes to put an end to this legend over all these years.
If we could find out what is in that well, we would know if there's any radiation occurring there, or even parts of the crash site. When the craft blew up and exploded, there could be pieces down in that well.
Most people search for just what's on the surface and don't take the time to really dig down and find out. You know, it's interesting to note that we're back here where it all started. Right here on this very site. Time has come and gone. A lot of stories has come and gone. Until we can get on the other side, until we can get some good soil samples or get down in the well, this is where the story's going to stay, just rolling along and continuing to grow.
If the entire legend of the airship crash of 1897 is a hoax, then an amazing practical joke has been played on everyone by S.E. Hayden, the man who wrote the original newspaper article for the Dallas Morning News. But without concrete evidence, ufologists can neither debunk the hoax nor prove the legend to be true.
There are lots of legends and stories going around that are passed from word of mouth and through newspaper clippings and so on. But we deal with the facts. We investigate UFOs, and we try to prove beyond the question of a doubt when we investigate a case that it was a UFO.
I would say that the probability of the crash actually happening is probably 85%. I think there's strong evidence for that.
The Aurora spaceship crash of 1897, I believe, is the smoking gun of the UFO controversy. Because in earlier years, the debunkers would say, well, it's just misidentified aircraft, satellites, commercial, military, maybe even secret government test craft. Well, I often thought, wouldn't it be great if we had a well-documented instance of the UFO before any of that was in the air? And we do, with the Aurora, Texas crash of 1897.
We are fairly sure there was a crash at that site. I mean, all the physical evidence, all the stories about the people that were available at the time all go together and they all fit. It's not a mistaken identity and it's not a tall tale.
My conclusion, in a nutshell, something happened in 1897 that to this day we cannot explain. We can eliminate a lot of stuff. We know it wasn't a balloon. We know it wasn't an airplane. What was it? I don't know. UFO? Obviously. Where the UFO came from, that's the big mystery that, quite frankly, will probably never be solved.
Will the ultimate truth ever be known about the Aurora case?
I don't know. I would like to think that there is an alien in the grave, but it may come down to there's nothing in the grave. That's the legend.
tale of war more than 3,000 years old has Josh diving deep into the Aegean Sea, taking aim from a chariot of fire, and journeying to an island with a history of extreme violence.
This is a big deal.
Troy, of Gods and Warriors on Digging for the Truth, next on the History Channel.